Archbishop Timothy P. Broglio was born in 1951 in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. He attended Catholic schools in Cleveland, and he earned his Bachelor of Arts in Classics at Boston College, an STB in Theology, and a doctorate in Canon Law from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. Archbishop Broglio was ordained to the priesthood for the Diocese of Cleveland on the 19th of May, 1977, in the Chapel of Immaculate Conception of the North American College, Rome. From 1977 to 1979, he served as Associate Pastor, St. Margaret Mary Parish, South Euclid, and lectured in theology at Notre Dame College, South Euclid. From 1979 to 1983, Archbishop Broglio attended the Pontifical Ecclesiastical Academy. From 1990 to 2001, Archbishop Broglio served as Chief of Cabinet to Angelo Cardinal Sodano, Secretary of State to St. Pope John Paul II, and Desk Officer for Central America. The Archbishop was ordained as an Archbishop by His Holiness St. John Paul II on the 19th of March, 2001. On 19 November 2007, Archbishop Broglio was named the 4th Archbishop of the Military Services USA and installed on 25th of January 2008, the Feast of the Conversion of St. Paul. He is a member of the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops, and he currently serves as the President of the conference. We are delighted to welcome this evening Archbishop Broglio.
Thank you very much. It's always good to be home, so I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I confess that I wouldn't have been able to go to the Lyceum because I can't sing. Dinner speaking is an art, and I confess that I have not cultivated it very much. Some years ago, I was at a very formal dinner, and after the opening prayer, a speaker began and continued for about 45 minutes, a project that was very dear to his heart. About midway through the presentation, the bishop next to me leaned over and said, "Tell me that they front-loaded this event." I had to confess that I did not know. In fact, I did know that several other speakers were on the docket. Most of them were prudent. At any rate, as I said, I'm delighted to be here. The education offered at a school such as the Lyceum contributes to the preparation of well-rounded men and women who can contribute to building up and passing on civilization. I just spent the last few days in Rome for curial visits and was moved once again by the art and the architecture of the Eternal City. However, I can only really speak to you as a man of faith. St. John Henry Newman helps us to discover the strength we need to defend our faith in the face of opposition. He wrote about St. Benedict and monasticism in the West. And I quote, "St. Benedict found the world physical and social in ruins, and his mission was to restore it in a way not of science but of nature, not professing to do it by any set time or by any rare specific or by any series of strokes, but so quietly, patiently, gradually. Silent men were observed about the country or discovered in the forest, digging, clearing, and building. And other silent men, not seen, were sitting in the cold cloister, tiring their eyes and keeping their attention on the stretch while they painfully deciphered and copied and recopied manuscripts that they had saved. There was no one that contended or cried out or drew attention to what was going on. But by degrees, the woody swamp became a hermitage, a religious house, a farm, an abbey, a village, a seminary, a school of learning, and a city. The sainted English author and cardinal also points out that frequently invaders came and destroyed the results of these painstaking years in an hour's time. But that was not the end. The monks began anew and rebuilt what had been destroyed and advanced civilization. They did not take vengeance or remember evil, but renew the place. The monks and nuns were bright lights in an age of political chaos, cultural decay, unbridled violence, and the collapse of an empire. Where did they obtain the strength to build, renew, and build again? It certainly was in the classic ora et labora of the Benedictine tradition. They nourished their work and their efforts by the Eucharist, by marking the day with prayer, and by recognizing that everything ultimately comes from God, and He has the responsibility to make it work. To paraphrase St. John the 23rd, "It is your church, Lord. I have done my best, and now I'm going to bed." Often, we seem to be in the midst of a struggle, and it is not easy to defend ourselves. Certainly we have made and will make mistakes. In the midst of a crumbling civilization, our task is to rebuild, to pass on what we have received, and not to lose hope in the future. The document of the Second Vatican Council on Education, Gravissima Educatiae, wrote, "True education is defined in the complete formation of the whole person, ordered towards a pupil's eternal destiny, as well as the common good of society. The harmonious development of physical, moral, and intellectual talents, nurturing a sense of responsibility and the right use of freedom, and formation to take an active part in the social life are key components." The Vatican Council also tells us that the rise of atheism was among the most serious problems of the age, and asked believers whether their own ignorance of the faith or lukewarm witness were contributing to popular unbelief. We must not forget the legacy that is ours. The current Archbishop of Sydney in Australia, Anthony Fisher, a Dominican, posed a rhetorical question in his Erasmus lecture. He asked, and I quote, "Apart from the sanity that sanctity brings to a world of sin, the building of hospitals, hospices, and leprosaria, the creation of the university and the most comprehensive primary, secondary, and tertiary school system in the world, the endowment and staffing of orphanages, aged care homes, and other welfare institutions, apart from those things, what have Catholics ever done for us? Apart from ending human sacrifice, cannibalism, slavery, infanticide, and the chattel conception of women and children, the explication of a sublime moral code, and the vision of virtuous persons, the shaping of our language and discourse, the promotion of literacy, printing and libraries, the sponsorship of much science, medicine, and technology, and of traditions of art, music, literature, and architecture, the development of much of Western common, civil, and constitutional law, and the establishment of a corpus of theological and philosophical thought that has provided metaphysical grounding for our politics and so much else. Apart from all that, our secular antagonist presses, what has the church ever done for us? When the current mode wants to rewrite history, it's a good idea to keep the facts and the reality in mind. I spent 3 years at the nunciature in Paraguay, and the evidence of the reducciones, those communities established by the Jesuit missionaries to teach the native populations how to farm, to read, to play Renaissance music, to live in common, and practice evangelical virtues are still there for the eyes to see. The constructions are incredible for edifices dating to the 1600s. Despite what the movie The Mission might have communicated, that Jesuit social experiment ended only because the Jesuit Father General caved into the pressure from the Spanish and Portuguese thrones. He ended the experiment because the kings of Spain and Portugal told him either to end the reducciones or they would close the Jesuit schools in those countries that educated the more fortunate segments of the population. You could argue that the Society of Jesus considered it more important to educate and form the children of those who would later direct the fate of society. That would be a very benevolent interpretation. However, we cannot dismiss the importance of formation and education for the future of civilization. Remember the warning of Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, the Dean of the College of Cardinals, on the eve of the conclave that would elect him Bishop of Rome. He said, "We are building a dictatorship of relativism that does not recognize anything as definitive and whose ultimate goal consists solely of one's own ego and desires." He continued, "We, however, have a different goal. The Son of God, the true man. He is the measure of true humanism. An adult faith is not a faith that follows the trends of fashion and the latest novelty. A mature adult faith is deeply rooted in friendship with Christ. It is this friendship that opens us up to all that is good and gives us a criterion by which to distinguish true from false and deceit from true." His words were a clarion call for clear teaching, exemplary listening, and authentic witness. This theological expert at the Second Vatican Council and co-worker in the vineyard knew the perils of the present age, but had no fear of addressing them. His erudition in his capacity as a teacher, offer to us a body of learning and reflection that will enrich us for decades. It will take that long to read the corpus left to us and meditate on his message. Allow me also to recall Henry Kissinger's final public address at the Al Smith dinner in 2023. He said, among other things, the leader achieves consensus by offering a clear sense of purpose. A view of the future is the only inducement to shouldering the sacrifices that greatness demands. But we need a combination of the visionary and the factual. We obviously embrace the virtues of our faith because we want to draw closer to Christ and live profoundly that faith. However, we also want to draw others into this experience of divine friendship. We defend our faith, but we also invite others to experience its truth, solace, and an ever deeper relationship with Christ. Yesterday, on the flight back from Rome to Washington, I was working on this address, and I discovered the one that I gave to the graduates of the Lyceum in 2017. I gave it a quick examination to make certain that I was not repeating myself, and then almost laughed out loud at the notion that anyone would remember a graduation talk 7 years ago. I'm not Admiral McRaven, whom I quoted extensively in that address. However, it is useful to remember that we are here to support an institution that forms young women and men of character who will contribute to the future of the world and this great land. The classics are the building block that will allow one to do anything. I always enjoy citing John Courtney Murray, the Jesuit priest who remarked that the United States was the only country founded on principles. If you read the Declaration of Independence, you will discover at the beginning, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It means that the United States was not established because of a common ethnic or racial origin, or a common language, or those other elements that characterize many other nations of the world. It is based on certain self-evident truths: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We cannot lose those truths. We must defend them because they are given to us not by the state, but by Almighty God. We may well be called to engage in a challenging struggle which will exact no little price. Several years ago, Pope Benedict XVI was very clear when he spoke to us, the bishops of Region 4. And he said it is imperative that the entire Catholic community in the United States come to realize the grave threats to the Church's public moral witness presented by a radical secularism which finds increasing expression in the political and cultural spheres. The seriousness of these threats needs to be clearly appreciated at every level of ecclesial life. Of particular concern are certain attempts being made to limit that most cherished of American freedoms, the freedom of religion. The Holy Father then specifically mentioned the denial of the right of conscientious objection to Catholics and our institutions. He also warned of the danger of limiting freedom of religion to freedom of worship, with no guarantee of respect for the freedom of conscience. The very next day, we learned about the decision of the Department of Health and Human Services to oblige our institutions to violate Catholic moral teaching and our consciences. Today, those dangers are even more evident as we see a government making regulations that do not respect conscience, impose politically correct discourse, and attempt to eliminate any dissension from their viewpoint. Pope Benedict spoke about the incredible importance of the laity in this struggle. It is undeniable. It seems incredible that government agencies in 2024 can tell Catholics to put their religious convictions at the back of the bus and also finance violations of moral law. We will have to learn from Rosa Parks and resist an evil law by disobeying it. More important, however, will be our efforts to engage the legal system in assuring an adequate defense of our constitutional rights. I confess that I have always admired St. Paul's use of Roman law to defend himself and also to further his ministry. Thomas More is another good example. He could only be condemned to death because an official perjured himself to obtain an office. The Synod, in which we are currently engaged, has spent a great deal of energy in talking about the role of the laity. But we must never forget what the Second Vatican Council said of that role. It is to permeate society with the fragrance of the gospel. It is to be the leaven in the midst of the society. While we rejoice in the new willingness to listen, we must never forget that the future depends on the witness and the action of the laity in the world to conform that world to Jesus Christ and his gospel. If that is not accomplished, it will not matter if there are lay women, men and women in church governance or not. Think about what Pope Francis told the leadership of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops on Thursday when he spoke about our activity to cultivate world peace and the importance of the dignity of immigrants. I know that immigration issues are a touchy subject at this time, but they are also part of who we are. So also our care for the poor, an equitable distribution of the world's goods, and ecology, just to mention a few. Back in 1980, then Archbishop James Hickey, who as bishop of this diocese called me to major orders, cautioned the assembly at his first Red Mass as Archbishop of Washington, and I quote, "Laws are not necessarily the embodiment of moral good. Indeed, it is possible that some laws undermine rather than enrich the human family. Members of a pluralistic society must, therefore, face the challenging fact that what is clearly legal is not automatically clearly moral. If we need evidence of this, we need only think of laws that have supported slavery, the subordination of women, disenfranchising of Native Americans, and various forms of ethnic, racial, and religious prejudice. Even when such policies were legal, they were still immoral. My dear friends, I have certainly exhausted your patience, but I am grateful for your attention and very grateful for your support of this institution. On Thursday night, a dear friend who preached at my first Mass in Santa Maria in Trastevere reminded me of a line in his homily when he switched from English into Italian for my Italian relatives in attendance. He made reference in that homily to this already too long discourse. He is still teased about that phrase by another longtime friend. It may well be the only thing you remember from this discourse as well. Thank you, and God bless you.